schooling?
I got really pissed because there was like, I think I didn't see the one with Demon Mama and Hans, but I saw the one with Hans and Riverboat Jack. And I want to give Hans the benefit of the doubt because he seems like a relatively decent dude who was just fucking super wound up and going ham. But he was saying like, there's no fucking research been done on it because it's a fucking pipe dream, blah, blah, blah. It's never fucking happened. And you got like, what is it, like, it was like 30, 40 years of the modern school movement in the United States we can draw research from. You've got the Summerhill School in the United
What do you think Hans's point was? To just see if you even know what it is.
Sorry?
What do you think Hans's point was?
Oh, that schooling needs to be mandatory.
What do you think he means by schooling needs to be mandatory?
That children need to be forced to go to school in order that they'll learn?
Do you think that he means like physical school or some type of education?
Some type of education.
What could possibly be wrong about that take?
Well, for example, you have the Summerhill School here in the United Kingdom, which has been active since the 1920s, I think, where they have a policy of like kids can play as much as they want, right? The kids get dropped off there, but they don't have to attend any lessons. They can attend the lessons that they want to attend. They can play as much as they want. They still have educational standards that meet the national standard, and they have much better social and communicative skills, right? Their communicative skills are described by Ofsted as outstanding, and their academic achievements are considered to be
okay. So what you described is a school that has a criteria. Like, so what that doesn't defeat Hans' points at all.
Well, there's no mandatory education there.
So. Wait, what do you mean by mandatory? Wait, what do you mean by mandatory? When you're describing a school having what you consider to be unlimited playtime, right, but still having a criteria that you need to meet, a grade point or what criteria that you need to meet, right? Because that's what you said.
Well, you as the individual child doesn't need to meet it. Unfortunately, we don't live in an anarchist society, right? So we have state bodies governing education standards here in the United Kingdom that like a school would probably get shut down if it consistently didn't meet those standards, right? So what I'm saying is that even though children aren't mandated to engage with education, they still do freely through their own choice, right? And attain standards that are
so I'm willing to bet it's not as simple as you're making it out to be. So if I'm in the UK and
I've got the FZ report.
So like let's talk about this. If I'm in the UK, can I just decide to never send my kid to school?
Can you just decide to never send your kid to school?
Yeah. Can I, as a parent, just say you're never going to?
The state would stop you from
doing that. So how is that not mandatory schooling?
I mean, you have mandatory schooling in the United States.
And
sure.
No, in the United Kingdom is what I'm talking about.
Oh right. Yeah. I mean, you have mandatory schooling, but
so
like you said,
why are you referencing a summer school, right? In the UK and saying this is an example of mandatory schooling not being something that is like the most effective thing when in the UK there is mandatory schooling.
Okay. So not a summer school, the Summerhill School. You can
the Summerhill School.
Yeah, I know. No, it can be confusing. But what I'm saying is, right, like you asked me the question, do you think going to when Hans says compulsory education, does he mean he has to go to a school, right? Like here in the United Kingdom, we mandate that people have to go to a school. It's not particularly well enforced. I stopped going to school at like 13, and
so did I. It's not well enforced in America either.
But like effectively, we have that, right? And that means so you have like mandatory schooling, but we don't have what you specifically picked out, which is mandatory education, right? Like children go to the Summerhill School and are not obligated to engage with any of the educational activities that are present there at the school. It's also completely
that's not even true, because what you said later is that if they find that the school doesn't meet standards for grades coming out of the school, that the school will be shut down. So it absolutely is. The responsibility then isn't put on the kid. The responsibility then is put on the school.
Sure. However, they don't need to say kids absolutely have to attend educational activities, right? In order to attain those standards. They attain those standards without mandating education.
No, that's not how mandating education works. This is what I was talking about. When Hans is talking about mandating education, he's talking about making people go to school or get educated, more specifically, by law.
Yeah.
Now, if that means summer
Mandating
school,
people
if
engage with educational activities.
if that means like homeschooling, tutorships, accelerated programs in specific areas, online schooling, or just like traditional schooling, all of those are options. That's Hans's position, right? And what you described is mandatory schooling because you are state forced to go to that school. That's it. Hans never said like, oh, it can't be a school where it's primarily recess time or what have you. He never said anything like that. So your point about this Summer Hills school or whatever it is completely irrelevant because you have mandatory schooling and you're forced to go to that school. That's his whole position. You should be forced to have to send your kid to school.
Right, but like we said, there's no mandatory education. Like, I'm not looking for a cheap gotcha here. I'm saying that like the anarchist model of education is like kind of proven to work, right?
Not really. It's like absolutely. There's not been widespread, wide scale.
Model, I would say there's like multiple anarchists.
You could make an argument that maybe this specific thing that you're talking about is an instant. I haven't even looked into it. And maybe it might not be congruent, or maybe it is congruent with what you're referencing. I don't know, but like to the idea that it's been proven in any widespread sense, absolutely not. There has not been widespread evidence that this system of schooling is superior to any other system of schooling.
Well, I mean, if you meet the regular standards, right? If you attain the standard that is the average standard throughout the nation, and you have outstanding levels of social and communicative ability, I would say it's superior. Also,
hold on.
Like, not just in
Vivian,
terms of
you just described every private school in America. Okay? You need to look at wealth of the individuals who have the money or capabilities or the region or in the regional location to be able to go there. It's not as simple as, well, they have great outcomes. It's that simple. Because then, wow, congratulate. Everybody should be going to Harvard. It's not that simple.
You're right. That's why there was more to my statement, right? The other way that I would say that it's superior is that where possible, just like you were saying with reducing harm, right? Where possible, we should be extending autonomy as much as possible to all individuals, right?
And like, Hans could agree with that as long as we're still forcing our kids to go to school.
Okay. I mean, that
has no conflict with Hans's position whatsoever.
Okay. It's just...
Well, no, it's not like, okay, do you agree or disagree? There is no conflict between that we should reform schooling. Let's say that he agrees with you. We should reform schooling to the point where in which little kids can decide 6 hours of playtime today is good as long as they meet grades or whatever, right? You don't have to sit in a classroom an hour a day or whatever. As long as you're meeting marks, it doesn't matter. You just can do whatever the fuck you want, right?
I mean, you don't need to meet grades or meet marks as an individual, right? Like the state requires that the children achieve a kind of average grade, otherwise they're.
I don't buy that. I don't buy this either. You're telling me out of this Summer Hills school. So you're telling me out of this Summer Hills school, I can get Fs in all of my classes but get a diploma?
No, that's not what I'm saying, really.
Okay, so then what do you mean?
I'm saying that like the state requires a certain average grade of students in order that the schools stay open, right? But the individual student is not like beholden to that. They don't have to achieve a specific grade to keep going to the school.
Wait, if this is you know you don't have to do so either in America, right? I can get straight Fs in high school and just stay in high school. So what's the difference?
So the difference is that you don't have to engage with any of the educational activities. You're not required to go to classes. You can choose which classes you go to. There's much greater like autonomy.
Okay, hold on. That's different.
And the staff act as almost democratic equals.
So what you're saying to me is I don't have to go to any classes to be in that school, and the government won't come after me. That's what you're committing to. That I can register to go to that school, never show up a single day, never show up a single. So you're committing. So you're telling me if I look up, hold on, you're telling me if I look up right now, if in the UK truancy, a 100% rate of not going to any class, a 100% rate of truancy means that the whatever, the authorities go, whatever. You're registered for school, but you're not going to school. Who cares? You might as well be in school. That their law, hold on, because I just want to establish exactly what I'm saying. You said that the law in the UK, and we agreed. Well, I want to establish it for the audience then. That the law in the UK establishes that a kid must go to school, right? By law. But what you're saying is the big loophole is you sign up to go to this specific school and you never have to show up any day, and the police won't come after you because you're registered for the school.
It's a boarding school, right? So you're pretty much
yeah. You can still not go to class at a boarding school.
Yeah, and that's precisely the point, right? So you're still at the school, right? But you can just be doing infinite recess. You can just have as much playtime as you want.
No, what I'm asking you, no. So what I'm asking you is, if you choose to never go to class, never go to the school, at this school, will you get in trouble? Will the police come down on your parents? Okay, I'm gonna have at a guess and say that that's not really the case, and just assume you didn't look into it if I find out that it isn't the case.
Well, I don't know where the wires are really getting crossed here. Like I said, the student is present at the school because it's a boarding school, right? So they're not truant in the eyes of the government.
They absolutely wait. That's not what truancy is.
Any clients.
That's not what truancy is. Wait, would you agree that if I live on campus at a college, in a dorm room, I'm never truant? Because I'm always on campus?
I'm just saying in the eyes of the government.
Right? In the eyes of the... I'm asking you about I don't think the government is that stupid. Oh, well, they got a dorm room on campus, guys, so, they're not truant. No, it's you have to go to class.
I mean, you can just go look at their website. You can look at the government reports about them and stuff. It's infinite playtime, as much as you want to do. You can do whatever the fuck you want, whenever the fuck you want. Right, and kids still choose to engage with the educational activities that are on offer there.
Sure, I'm not. That's fine. That's fine that you can agree with that, but that isn't different than mandatory. There's still mandatory schooling. What do you mean? How isn't that mandatory schooling? I think the confusion.
You started off this conversation by making the distinction between engaging in educational activities and attending a physical building, right? And now you want to dissolve that particular distinction. Okay, so we've got that distinction, okay, and we're saying that engaging with educational activities, right, that is what ought to be mandated. And I'm saying it is not mandated here. Sorry, I've got something in my throat.
No, I'm stating that you need to hit some measure of education. You need to get educated. You need to show that you have been educated in X and Y and Z field. That's what is mandatory. If you can educate yourself at your home on your computer, you can. We could, homeschooling. You can do that. If that's something that you want to do, then that's something that you can do. As long as your kid meets marks for what we consider to be educated, as long as your kid is getting educated, that's all we care about.
Wait, no, you don't measure an individual child's, the parent's not going to get in trouble if the kid isn't making their grades. The kid only has to,
well, sure, yeah, we already established that, yeah.
Yeah, the kid only has to attend educational activities.
At the moment, correct, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm saying that in this specific case, and actually in the United States for 30 or 40 years during the modern school movement, right? This wasn't the case. They were at the Summerhill School, they are required to be on the premises, but they do not have to engage with any educational activities whatsoever. There is no mandate for them to do that. They can just play infinitely.
What is incongruent with Hans's position on that?
Like we said at the beginning, right? what is being argued is it ought be mandated that children engage with educational activities.
So what do
I'm
you think
saying
that looks like?
That doesn't happen in this case.
So what do you think that looks like then?
I'm saying that doesn't happen in this case, right? That
I
not,
mean,
like children aren't mandated to
it
engage with the educational activities.
Okay.
Because the state doesn't measure individual students' achievement; it measures the whole school's achievement, right? And if the whole school meets a level of achievement, it doesn't matter if like a few kids are like deciding that they're just gonna play forever, right? So like the school doesn't get shut down. On an individual level,
we've already
as long as
established
the child is
that's
in
how it works in
attendance,
America
that's
as well.
fine.
I can get straight Fs and still like be meeting my criteria for going to school legally.
Sure, but you still have to go to your specific classes and stuff. Otherwise, you'll be marked down as true.
Yeah,
right?
and that's
like in most schools. Yeah.
Wait, hold up. And that's not incongruent with the. What the hell is that?
Hell as well.
Wait, hold up. What the hell is this? Is this a mask? What is this, Chad? What is that?
She got sunglasses on the back of her head.
Oh, oh no, they're just wearing really big sunglasses and a mask, like a face mask.
Oh.
It literally looks. It looks like somebody CGI'd a face on there. Is what it looks like to me. Does anybody else see what I'm seeing? It looks like a CGI'd face. Like somebody edited it on there. Look at that. It looks like a CGI'd face. Oh, that's really weird. Sorry. Yeah, no, there's not really any difference. There's no difference. Hans could agree that could be base. Like there's no big issue. Hans's niche case, I think the difference that you're trying to draw is when Hans was talking about kids need to be forced to be able to get themselves educated, otherwise they're not otherwise going to educate themselves, which is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
I don't think that is true.
Okay, well, hold on, Vivian, because what you just said is that you're not allowed off of the boarding school premises. And who sends children to boarding schools? It's parents.
Yeah.
That's who. So to get them in the environment in the first place to get educated, that we might agree could be poggers for getting them educated, you need to forcibly send them to a boarding school.
So if I can try and come at this from like a slightly different angle, right? I think that the broader argument is that kids need to be forced to engage with education, right? That otherwise, if they have the option, the choice to just like fuck around with their friends,
not necessarily.
That's what they'll do.
That is an aspect of
I heard Hans make similar statements.
So that's not the. So that's an aspect of the argument. Another bit of the argument as well is that there are parents that don't give a fuck about their kids, and the state needs to get involved to be able to intervene in those cases, so that way the kid gets educated.
Sorry.
Sometimes the parents don't give a fuck about the kid, and the state needs to get involved to be able to educate that kid.
Sure, yeah. We should probably be doing community schooling anyway. Like, parents still need... One of the big functions of schools is that parents need somebody to look after their kids while they're away at work, right? Like, so the kids are basically required to go there so that there's some guardianship, etc. And, like, we need that, right?
I don't know what you're talking about. What are you talking about?
I'm saying that if we make educational activities available to children, but don't mandate that they engage with those educational activities, we still achieve a pretty decent rate of education, right?
I disagree.
One that is acceptable to the... Dude,
nice
what the fuck? Piss off. Sorry.
There's a little dank.
It's Ronnie James Dio. I think it's fucking... I can't remember which one, actually. Rainbow in the Dark.
So, yeah, it's a boarding school. Their parents forced them into that position in the first place, and their state mandated to stay there. I don't know what you mean.
I'm making the more broader statement, right? That we don't need to mandate children to engage with educational activities. The schools should be more democratic. Children should have more decision in like how they're going to engage with education.
So you don't think
that we should try and...
I thought you were
that we
done.
should try and give greater autonomy to these children and teach them more about working together as like a democratic society rather than having to take orders from arbitrarily defined authority figures.
Okay, so you don't think any of the kids at that Summerhill school has ever tried to like get away from the school? Ever?
I mean, I'm sure they have.
Right, so that's what the whole point of
away.
mandatory education is for those niche cases, those edge cases especially, and sometimes the more common cases of kids not wanting to go to school. That's what it's for. So we can hold parents accountable and that their kids need to get educated, because I believe it is child abuse to not get your kid properly educated. And if that's the case, then we should have the state reinforce that moral prescription, I guess I would say, moral prescription.
So you're saying in the case of a child who never wants to engage with any of these educational activities, we ought to like take that kid and force them to engage with those activities.
Yeah,
right?
we should probably figure out why. We should probably figure out why through a mental health professional, and then give them, force them into some form of education. Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously, for some people, not every educational activity is going to be super comfortable. But there's probably going to be something. You need to get educated in order to be like a productive member of society. So,
yeah, and I think so. When the modern school movement was started, when what's his name, A.F. Neil or whatever started the Summerhill School here in the UK, when you have free air. Oh fuck me, I'm trying to remember these names from like months ago. But the underlying idea is that like if you want to change society at large, then you want to start with education, right? That you want to imbue in students and children the values that you want to see in broader society. I mean, the really early anarchist schools were just like completely happy saying, yeah, we want to teach kids like a more anarchist way of thought, right? And so the idea is that like you saying you need to teach them specific things so that they can be productive members of society is kind of contradictory to the idea that if you teach them other things, you can reshape society in a way that is more conducive to human happiness, right? So, like teaching somebody to be a worker drone is not necessarily the best way to go about things.
There's no conflict with teaching somebody how to be a productive member of society and teaching somebody how to be a more a member of society that's more conducive to positive change.
That
There's
really
no conflict.
depends on what kind of society you have.
Not,
right?
I mean, if we assume like Nazi Germany, sure, but in any modern sense, no.
Well, no. What do you mean? What do you mean by productive?
Okay,
right?
let me give you an example. Right, a productive member of society is somebody that knows how to do, like, for instance, probably basic algebra, and knows reading and writing literacy and things like this. Right?
But what are they programmed? What are they expected to be doing when they grow up? Right? They're expected to.
Presumably whatever the fuck career they want to go down, whatever job they want to do, whatever path life wants to choose them.
Yeah. So the anarchist position would be that you want people who are looking for more democratic kind of positions rather than to fit in within a worker boss hierarchy.
What do you talking? So a job doesn't have to be a worker boss hierarchy. What do you mean?
It doesn't, right? But like
there's no conflict here.
The American education system you currently have, right, like is based entirely on making somebody employable, right, and making somebody employable within the current system.
I disagree with this. I really do. I really do, because I think it's pretty shit at this in many different ways. So, like, let me give you one example. If this was true, why do so many people get useless degrees? Unironically.
Because regardless of the pressures, you cannot completely stifle people's creativity and autonomy.
Okay, that's not an actual answer, okay? So what a moment ago you just said is the whole pipeline, the whole system is there to produce you to like get jobs. There is a massive amount of people getting degrees that literally no job will have you. Why do these school systems even teach these things? The entire school system,
degrees are we talking
like a liberal
about
arts degree.
A liberal what, like history?
Yeah, like a liberal, like or like
So like journalists and politicians
no,
are
not journalists
hugely
and
overrepresented, and
not
accountants actually
necessarily those.
hugely
Oh,
overrepresented
is
among history graduates for some fucking weird reason. I don't agree that like the vast majority of these degrees are what you say they are. Sure, if you're going to some
what,
weird ass
useless?
university where you're getting a degree in Star Trek, sure, right? But like you said liberal arts
Yeah.
degrees, and I gave history as an example, and history like is the degree that I took, and uh they are pretty fucking decent earners, actually, history graduates.
Well,
A
no,
lot of them
okay,
go into
so
accountancy for some bizarre reason, but they're also highly represented among politicians and journalists.
can you tell me like what jobs you get with a liberal arts degree? Do you know? Do you have any
I
idea?
just, I just did.
So no, those are you're talking about just a general history degree.
Yeah, I'm talking about a specific liberal arts degree. Yeah, obviously, what jobs you're going to get from a liberal arts degree depends on what liberal arts degree you get.
Of course.
If you get the one the conservatives rail about all the time, fucking gender studies graduates go on to become journalists. They go on to become consultants, um, activists. A lot of them, to be fair,
Wait,
working for
so
NGOs
hold
and
on.
shit.
Is your standard for what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a mostly useless degree is literally something that is not applicable to any situation ever?
What? No, you said it's a useless degree.
Yeah,
Like
it's pretty
they're not.
goddamn useless.
My argument is that actually these degrees are often quite employable, um, even though they're liberal arts degrees that people seem to look down on for some reason. Uh, I don't know.
Because
Maybe
their
because they teach
employability.
critical thinking, which
No,
America fucking hates.
their
But like,
employability is very low. That's the reason why. It's renowned for not having good rates of being hired within the field of liberal arts. You go on to do something else besides liberal arts, and granted, you get paid more because going to college is base and it gets you a bunch of money. But
like these people are still pretty employable, though, is what I'm saying, right? Like there aren't that many like
so that's what I'm asking. What are you looking for when you're like trying to? Imagine an example of somebody going to college for.
Useless.
Well,
like
obviously. So part of the reason why the degree is not useless is because I don't know what you're like looking for here. Are you talking about?
The reason the degree isn't useless is because I'll talk about what I know, right? History teaches you skills that are really effective in things like politics and journalism. Teaches you how to form arguments and all that sort of shit.
History doesn't teach you how to form arguments.
Yes, it does. What?
History
is
at all
about arguments. What are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
The entire discipline of history is debate.
So, wait, the entire discipline of everything is debate. What do you mean?
I mean that the entire discipline of history is about source analysis, presenting information, and trying to create a narrative argument over like. So you just.
What do you think philosophy is?
Another liberal arts degree that also teaches you similar skills.
Similar skills than history?
Yeah, I mean, history is an extremely philosophical degree. That's why it's in the liberal arts category and not in the STEM field.
Okay, right? Okay, buddy. I'm gonna disagree with that one.
What do you think we do in a history degree? Do you think we just learn dates and times and then
I know exactly what you're talking about. I understand that like there's a big part of history is debating which kinds of sources are reliable to be able to determine which is X, Y, and Z. But it's usually in the context of understanding the history or surrounding environment of what is happening, not formulating like what it would be like fundamental learning about arguments themselves. So when you're talking about learning about arguments, history is not at all what comes to mind. Philosophy is what comes to mind. That's what you go to if you want to talk about arguments. I know what you're saying. There's philosophy inside of history, sure, but that's within the context of how to examine, for instance, observable information in historical context and how that references with cultural context, not how to make the arguments fundamentally themselves.
Well,
so that was the divorcing that I had.
Arguments, you're going to get shit grades. Like, literally everything in history is about making arguments.
That's
Like,
what it like. That's what isn't that what literally a PhD like dissertation is in general, is like making an argument to begin with. So like
well, so
my
actually,
issue was that when you said learning about how to make arguments, I took issue with that because I thought what you meant is in a similar capacity to philosophy, whereas like you're learning what an argument is, why an argument is the way that it is, and the structure of it. When you're talking about learning how to
no,
make
that's
arguments,
like learning about arguments, not learning how to make arguments.
no, it is
That's
learning how to
like
make
two separate
arguments.
things.
What you're
I
like
know
the
philosophy, you would learn how to make arguments as well, but I'm saying
so
that,
yeah,
like,
so my
yeah,
confusion was the way that you said that. I thought what you meant was how to make arguments, like how a argument is made. But what you mean is how to make historically an argument to history, an appeal to history, is what you're making an argument about. And learning how to make
Yeah,
an actual argument about that. But then that applies
not
to
how
literally
an
everything. Yeah, but then that applies
yeah,
to
not how
literally
an
every
argument
field.
is constructed, but like how it.
Right, and
I
then
mean,
so
I would argue, I
so
would argue something like history
so
teaches critical thought much better than something like I don't know, like fucking biology, right?
what
Like
really?
biology. Well, yeah, because if you look at the significant difference between like STEM and liberal, like quote unquote liberal arts degrees, we would call them the humanities here in the United
Okay,
Kingdom, right? Is
I
one,
no.
you're operating off um like solid facts and data and making inferences from that data, and the other one, you're attempting to analyze the more human element, right? Source bias, uh perspective, all
You do
that
the
sort of
same
stuff,
exact thing in biology.
create
You do the
and
wait,
create and
Vivian.
create
We're doing that. We're
narratives
doing that every
rather
day
than
with coronavirus. We're doing that every day with coronavirus research, sourcing bias, making sure there's no bias when it comes to these
okay, but
sources.
you're trying to establish facts
So are you in
in
history? Are you not trying to
biology.
establish facts in history? That's what you do in history. No.
No, broadly not. Um,
What? Wait,
so
Wait, what history? What do you do in history besides establishing facts?
so in history, you're trying to tell stories, establish narratives, and uh, give people a picture of like
And the hope is to have them be
what may have happened
factually,
and why,
yeah,
and
and
what
the
the
hope is to be
motivations are.
factually correct as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, but there's like a substantial difference between saying, you know, is this a positively or negatively charged neutron, to which there is a definitive
Yeah, it's
answer,
called a hard
right?
science versus like something that might be a soft science.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So it's not quite the same as um, like you wanna try and make sure that the facts the things you're basing your arguments on are like as factual as possible, but you realize that there is no solid yes or no answer in history a lot of the time, right? Because you're asking more moral questions, philosophical questions, rather than asking purely about
Well,
what
but
is and
those
what
moral
isn't.
and philosophical questions have to be backed up by some kind of grounding and what have you in some factual reality. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
of course.
completely it's all
No, I'm not
bedrocked
saying
off of
it's
fact,
completely divorced. I'm
right?
saying that these are more complex arguments to which there might not be definitive answers, and it's purely dependent upon perspective and personal values and what you're trying to communicate through the narrative, rather than in the hard sciences where you're literally trying to determine what is and what isn't.
Well, sure, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, so, but then, like, still, you could get into fucking other shit as well. But
Like it's more philosophically complicated, is
yeah,
what I'm saying.
yeah, sure. I'm not gonna disagree with that. Or it deals more with like philosophy than science is dealing with a settled
I mean,
philosophy, quote
science, you have
unquote.
to learn about the philosophy of science,
Yeah,
right?
and
The
that's more of
scientific
a
methods
yeah,
of
and that's more of a
philosophy.
settled philosophy. There's not really much debate as to whether or not the scientific method is good.
Well, it's a philosophical claim about epistemology, but yeah, as like a science student, you're not going to be like, oh, well, should we, can we really know through this method? Blah blah blah. You're just, you just
Well,
learn the
actually,
scientific
I
method
mean
and rely
that
upon it
you
generally.
do that in theory a lot. Like for instance, in quantum mechanics, that is like the
Sure,
number
yeah,
one thing
science gets
happening.
really fucking weird when you get to really small things.
But sure. So like with stuff like that, it's like half of it is philosophy. And so, but anyway, well, it has to do with like theory. That's how my whole thing, to bring it back, and the misunderstanding that was happening when you were talking about science, or sorry, history, and it being about arguments. I would just argue that the way that you're using that, every discipline is about arguments, and that was like, because every discipline you have to make an argument for what you're doing. Accounting is this way.
Sure.
Making an argument why this certain type of deduction, or well, that's more mathematically solvable, but not also necessarily either, because it has to do with future proofing and things like this. Marketing is incredibly like this. All of these different things are like that. Sure.
Marketing is a weird one, because it almost is like down to a science, down to like a hard science at this point, because you can
I
take
completely
facts, figures,
disagree.
and so on.
I actually pretty strongly disagree with the marketing is a hard science. I think you can.
It is a hard science. I think it's almost down to a hard science, because it's rather than trying to determine motivations or whatever, you literally just have to plug in the data, right, and see what approach is more successful.
It's not that simple, because what about new approaches? That's what marketing is all about, is new approaches. That's what marketing is all about, though. Give me a new approach to targeting this audience, and that's where like science and stats can help you 100%, but like it's not going to give you the answers. People are renowned for failing all the time, and they have some of the best available marketers at their disposal. It's incredibly complex. When you're talking about marketing, you're talking about literally how can we convince the masses to do something, and that's like. How do you like? That's like you're getting into psychology. Then it's not settled at all.
Sure. Yeah.
So anyway, but yeah, was the confusion, is when you were talking about like history and arguments there. How to make arguments. I was like, I don't know what you mean, because that's like many philosophical fields. But like now that I understand what you mean by that, what you mean by making arguments, I mean, I just feel like that's a very broad way to put it, because I would argue like almost every field is about that.
I wasn't expecting to get into the weeds with it. I guess like I made that statement assuming you'd understand what I meant, rather than like going down that rabbit hole. But like the overall statement came about because what I was saying is that like liberal arts degrees do teach employable skills, right? You said these are like useless degrees, and I was saying that actually, dependent upon your profession, right, they're really quite useful degrees. I would say a lot of liberal arts degrees are incredibly fucking useful for journalism, right?
Well, whereas, I mean, sure, I guess, but and then this is where I got into the conversation about what would I have to describe to you to meet the merit of being a useless degree. What in your mind is a useless degree? Like, what would that be if it was a thing in theory?
Yeah, and then we're going even like slightly further back, right? Because I would say that I don't actually think any degree is useless, because if it is edifying to the person who takes the degree, right? If they get something out of it, then it's got some use to them.
So we got onto this.
But in our current society, there could be some degrees that teach you absolutely no skills that make you employable in our current system, right? That would be useless to you in becoming a productive.
Give me any example. Give me any example. I don't think one such exists.
I'm not 100% sure, but like some fucking Star Trek degree or some bullshit like that. When people say useless degrees, I'm thinking, like Star Trek University. Just, yeah. I mean, learn how a fictional warp core.
So that's what I wanted to kind of get into, is what does that even mean to then be useless? Like, how useless does useless need to be before it enters that arena for you? Because I could easily make the argument
it makes you unemployable. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
What if I want to start a YouTube channel about it? What if I want to start a YouTube channel about it and create entertainment in regards to Star Trek?
Then it's probably useful, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that's what I mean.
It's your statement that there are useless degrees. I guess I just don't agree.
Right. But you fundamentally disagree, because any interest that any human could ever have could be something that I look into with the prospects of making that into like a entertainment career. So there, in your definition, there is no such thing as a useless degree. It can't physically exist.
You understand how like entertainment degrees and stuff are like really looked down on. Like if you go to study music at university, like people are generally like, "Lol, you're never going to make any money out of that," right?
Sure.
And that's kind of the standard, and that's why.
But they still teach it though. Why?
Because people want it.
Right, and so that's my whole point, bringing it back to the original thing. You were saying that the whole reason college exists is to just make it so that way you can enter the job market effectively. I don't really agree.
I said the schooling system, right? So
okay, I think you could grant that's what I meant. I said education system.
I mean, I'm not just saying college. I'm saying like we're talking about kids here. Like once you get college, that's like your choice what you want to try and do with your life. But in the younger years, it's very much focused on employability, right?
Can you give me an example of where it's focused on employability and not a useful skill that you might need in life?
Sure. Quadratic equations. Who the fuck needs that?
Well, as a general education, we might need that to be able to, like, I don't know, do various different types of tasks in our day-to-day lives, like things.
Really? Have you ever used a quadratic equation in your day-to-day life?
We like may so. I may not. So, like a good example is I don't often use trig, or sorry, not trig. Geometry, but it can be very, very helpful to many people in their day-to-day life. And quadratic equations could be very helpful for answering certain questions when it comes to like. Let's say you do certain types of inventory or what have you, inventory management. If you play like a really complicated resource management game as well, it could be potentially helpful.
Okay, but like, so inventory management is like not something people generally do in their sort of like day-to-day life. That's like a warehousing thing.
But
right?
but a warehousing thing.
If you want to argue that any of these skills could be useful in a game, sure.
Well, that's what I.
Be useful in a game.
So the point of me appealing to a video game is that it's something even as simple as a video game that people make. These ideas can be very helpful. This is a crazy looking scene right here, but So to talk about the warehouse, the whole point of teaching some of these things that like taking certain types of inventory and stuff like that, we want that to be like low skill labor as possible. That's the general idea, is to make every job as low skill as possible relative to our education level. So everybody can do the most fresh out of high school or fresh out of middle school, right? That's the goal, right? And so when you have, well, I mean, yeah, well, you want to just have an incredibly educated workforce. Why not? Why wouldn't you want to have an incredibly educated populace? You know, if your populace is incredibly educated, then I can go anywhere in the world. I have freedom of movement. I can go to India and be like a fucking doctor fresh out of high school. I can go to China, be a fucking neurosurgeon fresh out of high school, whatever, right? It's obviously never going to get to that degree, but like that's the point. Pretty wild, but that's the point, right? Is to give us such a great standard of education that us as humans naturally develop to the age of 18 or whatever we decide. We naturally develop into such a valuable human to the world that everybody has use for us and we're welcome everywhere based on our merits. That's the goal. No?
Yeah, I mean, I want to provide everybody all those like opportunities. I don't want to force people down particular paths. I want people to be able to.
Well, which path are we being forced down?
Well, I mean, you might be shit at math, right? You might be shit at math. You might just fucking hate math, and your energy might just be better spent elsewhere, right? And I think giving people the choice to pursue those things that they are passionate about and are good at, rather than forcing them to expend energy on things that they're probably never going to like attain a particularly high achievement in. I think that's wasteful. Actually,
well, it depends. It depends. So that just entirely depends on this. That entirely depends on the standard with which we need to talk about. So, like, for instance, I'm assuming me and you could both agree that subtraction, addition, and division, if you're having a lot of trouble with that, you need to learn that no matter what. So, like, we need to figure out what the hell is going wrong, and you need to learn that. We can agree on that, right? No matter what, you have to learn that shit. You agree?
Yeah, I think like basic counting skills, sure.
All right. Yeah. And then, like, what about algebra?
Algebra? No, I don't think it's really, like, I don't think it's an absolute essential. I think people can probably excel in some other area where they don't have to use algebra.
Okay. So, I mean, I think algebra is pretty helpful, but okay.
I'm sure it's
sorry,
it's helpful.
I don't want to morally load it that way. I think algebra is what I'd consider to be quite essential. To being able to get people on board to be able to start pursuing other careers, right? So, like, if I'm fresh out of high school, I don't know algebra, I decide maybe I want to go into a field like accounting. Well, I'm kind of fucked. Like, it's
okay, yeah,
I gotta.
No, if you're shit at math, you're not going to be an accountant, right? But that's not my argument, right? If you're shit at math, I don't know, maybe you'll be an amazing footballer or painter or musician or like any number of things, right?
Well, so
like,
are you suggesting then, like, if you're not suggesting a change or a divorcing to bring it all the way back to what we originally talked about, you're not talking about any kind of a fundamental change to mandatory schooling. You're just changing what our education standards might be. And fuck, Hans could agree with you, and to some degree, I agree with you. However, like, that's not a change to mandatory schooling. School would still be mandatory.
Well, I'm saying that people achieve these levels, right, to a similar degree, right? Because even in our current system, there's people who grow up who never learn to read and like never learn decent math or whatever, right? But they attain those skills, those basic skills that you're talking about, at a similar rate, whilst being given the autonomy to not engage with any educational activities at all if they don't want to, right? And pursue specifically the things that they really care about.
Because but they're still mandated to be at a school. They're mandated to be at the boarding school. They can't go home. They can't, like...
Well, yeah, because they fucking live there. And also because we exist in a place where the state mandates people to go to school. If your argument is we ought mandate people because we do mandate them and we can't get good examples of like what happens if you don't mandate them, I disagree. I think this is a good example of, like, at least on the individual level, not mandating them to attend educational activities, right? Like, they have to be present on the premises, but they don't have to engage with any educational activities if they don't want to. And that is functionally the same as not being in school in terms of what they should be able to learn. It isn't,
because you could apply something very similar to American schools. I can go to a school in America and just fucking jerk off on my phone all day, as long as I don't get caught.
Sure. Yeah.
And I could get straight Fs, and that would still count because I'm not truant. So, like, I don't think this is a good example. I don't think a boarding school like this is a good example. I think it's a good example, however, of how education, the way that we educate people in school, could be different and not be, like, completely shit. Maybe if, like, people self-govern it, you know, if I look into it. It's a good
example of how children do, in fact, choose to engage with education, right? Like, if the option is presented, because let's be fair, yes, you could go and like just jack off on your phone all fucking day in an American school, but you're gonna get shouted at, you're gonna get told off by your fucking teachers and shit. There's a general pressure for you to like engage with the educational activities on offer. You have to attend specific classes at specific times and so on, right? Whereas like if we have a more free approach to that, people still achieve the same level of like academic achievement, but they're much better developed in a lot of other areas, and it has the moral benefit of not being a less authoritarian and more democratic system.
Well, again, I don't think it's this simple. So, and the reason why I don't think it's this simple is because you need to get me demographics, like what is the average wage or earners of the people that can afford to send their kids to this boarding school. Maybe it's a really expensive boarding school, maybe it isn't, maybe it's in an area that only like people expensive, yeah. Well, then, like, do you think that maybe it's these kids probably have better resources to be able to do these things? And maybe that's the reason why they have comparable results to, like,
I
similar
think that
boarding
there's a lot.
schools?
I
It's
think there's a
5,000 euros per term?
yeah, it's
Or
pretty well.
pounds?
Our universities, in all fairness, are like £9,000 per term.
Is this
So
a university, though?
no, it's a boarding school, but you're paying for the children's like food and lodging it
Yeah,
within
but
that
for
as well.
5,000? Jesus Christ. Oh, my God.
Bless your little
Like,
cotton socks.
I feel like that probably should have been stated, no? That it's so incredibly expensive. That's pretty fucking expensive.
I mean, it pretty much has to be, right? Operating as like such a specialized school. I don't think it necessarily has to be that expensive, but operating as such a specialized school, I'm saying that when you say that like the research doesn't exist, right, or like that this could never work,
Well,
allowing
no,
children to choose what lessons they want to engage with, or if they want to engage with lessons at all, that this cannot work, and there's no evidence, there's no research that could possibly have been done on it because it's just never happened. I think that's a ridiculous fucking statement. I think the Summerhill School is one example. I think the modern
I
schools
don't
in the
think it
United
is a
States
good
are another.
example. I don't think it is a good example. I think that so if you think that the schools in America are a good example, do you think Hans wasn't just not looking at any school in America?
No, I said the modern schools, right? So the modern school movement was a series of schools that were all set up under a particular model of schooling that was democratic, basically, that children had a say in how the school was run, and that was free learning. So children were allowed to choose what educational activities they engaged with. Uh, yeah, if you like look up the modern school movement, you can just Google it.
Right. So my whole thing is I wouldn't expect something that costs $7,000 per term, a private school that costs $7,000 per term to be a good representation of how schooling can be. Like, any kid will just like choose to participate in it pretty willingly. I don't think
No,
that's
I
a good
agree.
example.
I agree with you. I think like but we can combine the experiences of all of this kind of method of schooling, right? I think they even use it in they even use like you have, I think it's called free learning, which is a similar kind of idea. There are so many kind of adjacent pedagogy, that's such a hard word to say, pedagogical methods um, that do similar things, where the child is free to choose whether to and what to engage with in terms of educational activity, that we actually have a broad range of things that we can draw from, and we can see that like this has some really positive effects for students quite often. um, and I'm sure in certain models there are some negative effects as well. I definitely don't want to gloss over the fact that like the Summerhill School started off and uh, you know uh, staff were sexing up older students because fucking libertarians, man. What the fuck are you gonna do? Can't put libertarians in a room with children. But like, um, but I think there are some really really positive things to learn from this like method of schooling. And I think it really is important that we try and extend autonomy as much as possible to children. And I don't think we ever got to that conversation because everybody was just like super hung up on like, I'll never work.
N-
Fuck you, dumbass.
no,
Fucking Anarchist.
that's
Fuck.
because it's not a part of the conversation.